Throwing Rocks by Savage Bruski. The captain was sweating, stifled in his helmet, in his armor and battle dress. One would normally be cool and refreshed so close to the ocean. Normally. Not today. Not with the scent of ash from cities and millions of human dead on the wind. Today, whatever gods existed in the universe had decided that Captain Zell Mariah of the 32nd Radian Recon Company Human Defense Force deserved to be faced with tasks that no amount of training could prepare one for. It began when the defense station in orbit had gone silent. The usual meteorological and spatial region condition reports, routine and pedantic, had never arrived. Queries sent to the station by Planetary Command had gone unanswered. The station was there, one could simply look up and see it still hung in low orbit, guns silent and vigilant. Then its weapons had turned on the support cruiser Heart of Endymion, breaking the friendly ship into splinters, all hands lost in a savage strike. How? Why? What happened? These questions had been asked of him and by him all morning. Command had vaguely hinted at some bug in the station's control systems, but Zell knew better. Stationed on one of Radian's many island chains, loosely deemed a continent, Zell's recon company, light infantry with a few tactical and light walkers, a handful of recruits, and a dilapidated tank or two, were very much ancillary. Out of any fight, and away from targets of interest to any invader. However, without transport inland to the larger islands, all he could do was ready his command, prepare, and await orders. Of the three main masses of land on the oceanic world, Senver, the one he stood on, the smallest and most remote, had a handful of research facilities, one small settlement, Riksgrad, and vast quantities of sand and rock. The spaceports, major cities, planetary command, and the larger bodies of troops and equipment, all the marbles, were on the centrally located larger continents of Verdawan and Altaria, thousands of miles distant. Then answers began to reveal themselves, not in the form of orders and broadcasts from command, but in the menacing silhouettes of high elven ships in orbit. A battleship and several cruisers now danced among the docking clamps of the orbital installation. Zell's earlier assumption that the station was not merely experiencing technical difficulties was confirmed by the fact that it now allowed landing craft and transport ships, some of them human, to drift between the elven fleet, clearly allied with whoever and whatever had taken the station. Command sent vague orders to maintain readiness. General Olsen had personally mobilized the bulk of the planetary forces, thousands of landing craft lifting off in a display not seen since the planet had been settled. Surely nothing could withstand the sheer numbers of guns, beams, and bombs those ships and the men aboard carried. Terrestrial or orbital forces those men might have beaten, but not the small asteroid aimed and guided at tremendous velocities directly at the spaceport they had just lifted off from not 3 hours ago. Rather than shed high elven blood, the aliens, weeks ago, had simply picked up a few asteroids from a nearby planetary ring, directed them at precise trajectories for the two major settlements, accelerated them to considerable speed, and let them go. An oracle must have commanded those forces to know the time and place to strike so many ships so effortlessly. The skies had turned a warm amber, too early for sunset then, the large masses of primordial stone and dirt breaking Radiant's atmosphere with a roar and a reverberating subsonic bass that everyone and everything felt for miles. The ships that weren't struck directly were hurled off course, their engines and lift motors unable to maintain any control. They exploded, fell, smoked, and burned. Half an instant later, the cities and spaceports below, hundreds of years in the making, were simply erased from existence. Millions of lives, thousands of families, and every trace of evidence that they had existed was simply gone. All Zell and his men had felt were dull thuds, brief earthquakes of low magnitude, a slightly darkened sky, and a tide that was rougher than usual for several hours. And now, just to compound the unfathomable loss, the High Elves finally decided they were going to set foot on Radian, right on his front doorstep. Landers and dropcraft hurtled through the atmosphere. The flame and smoke trails of thousands of ships blazed in the sky for the late afternoon. Several local commands, all small and isolated like his own, had radioed out for help, orders, direction. None came. Planetary command was gone, and Zelmariah, merely a captain, was now senior officer on the whole of Radian. The captain could think with an opponent to be observed, tracked, possibly want to be harassed. He could use his company as a surgeon wielded a scalpel to cut out infected tissue or to burn it directly, but to command everything left on the planet? To repel a force undiminished by combat and keep them from landing? To somehow deflect their offense without even knowing why the normally peaceful elves were now there? Madness. A sniper, his fellow officer, Lucia, walked up beside him, already training her rifle to peer through the scope at the incoming craft. "Oh, Captain, what are your orders?" Zell took a moment to collect himself, to observe, to think as his commanders and mentors had taught him. He recalled a simple axiom of massed battles that his uncle Seraph had taught at the War College. Wars are won a single battle at a time, so don't think of the rest of the engagement on the first day. Zell grinned wolfishly. The High Elves decided to throw rocks. The least we can do is throw a few back.